will be in Judges chapter 10, addressing the chili comment. Yes, we'll be eating here, or we'll have chili to go if you want to take it to go. And I need to confirm this with the parents, the high school parents who are leading the event. But the plan is to have takeout available for early church and after Bible class as well. So we'll try to have that available for everyone who wants chili. Hey. We are in Judges chapter 10. Last time we talked about Abimelech, which was a very fun person to talk about, kind of a failure of a judge altogether, not really even a judge. Today we're maybe going to talk about some of the most infamous stuff in Judges, but that's only because people don't know the really infamous stuff at the end of Judges. So we'll see how that goes here. First, we're going to start off with a couple of minor judges, but before we do that, you don't have to turn your Bibles there, but you're welcome to. Hebrews chapter 11. If we go to that, that's the famous faith chapter, where it defines faith. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, conviction of things not seen. And that kind of goes through this hall of fame of faith, where it talks about the faith of Abel, the faith of Abraham, the faith of Moses. And then it gets all the way through Joshua, and then when it hits Judges, it mentions 4 of the judges in the book of Judges. And what more shall I say? For time would fail for me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah. I always have a problem with his name, Jephthah. Let me go with that pronunciation. And when we read about him, you're going to be like, why would the author of Hebrews include him as a hero of faith? And we'll read why, but also why you absolutely wouldn't. Like Samson, I get why Samson's in there. Gideon, I get why Gideon's in there. And both those guys have problems. It's like, I already read about today. Let's just see how it goes. All right, we're going to start off with chapter 10. We have this small section here where we have 2 very minor judges named Tola and Jair, and there's not a lot said about them, so let's read about them and talk about them both together. Do I have a volunteer to read 10 verses 1 through 5? Judges 10, 1 through 5, volunteer to read. Start us off. Linda, right here.
After Abimelech there arose to save Israel Tola, the son of Puah, son of Dodo, a man of Issachar, and he lived at Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim, and he judged Israel 23 years. Then he died and was buried at Shamir. After him arose
Jair.
It's
like chair, but with a J.
Jair the Gileadite, who judged Israel 22 years. And he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys, and they had 30 cities called Havoth-Jair to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Jair died and was buried in Canaan.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, these guys aren't notable, partly because it doesn't seem like they were dealing with any invaders at this time. So they were judges during mostly peaceful times here. Not a lot to say about them. Tola, it says that he is from the land of Issachar, which on the map is right here. But it said also that he spent time in the hill country of Ephraim, which is down here. So likely he was kind of judge who kind of ranged between this area here. And if you notice, what side of the Jordan River is he on? Jordan River is right here, so what side is he on? West side of the Jordan River. The other guy is in Gilead, so he's on the east side of the Jordan River. So this seems sort of like they were the 2 main people. One guy took care of the west side, and one guy took care of the east side. So that kind of makes sense with this here. This other guy, he said he had 30 sons who rode 30 donkeys. As we mentioned, they're not really a horse people yet. They don't have horses yet. So donkeys are the cool thing. I think Ron called them the Cadillacs of the time period. Corvettes, sorry, my apology, the Corvettes. I'm just quoting Ron now. Anyway, the Corvettes. And that's the thing, is it would be stylish to go around on your donkey. It was a symbol of wealth and power. And him and his son sort of had this franchise thing where they controlled these 30 areas that were called the tent cities of Jair. Buried in Canaan, which isn't on the map. We don't need to worry about that, but he's in this region that says Gad right here. While it does say Gad, it's the tribe of Gad, it's much more often called Gilead because that's what the region is known as. So we have this guy over here with all these things. When it says that he had 30 sons who kind of controlled 30 cities, think of it very much, I would say, think of like a Wild West story where you have a sheriff. So what happens is, Dad's the governor, and he sends a Texas Ranger to every town in order to protect it. And so that's probably sort of the thought here. There's a law and order in that town. The bandit comes in, they ride up on their donkey and fight him. I don't know what happens exactly. But that sort of thing. It's a way that order is kept in this time period. That being said, there's nothing negative really to say about them because we don't have enough information to really talk about them. But it gives you a feel of just how fragmented Israel is at this time period. It should also be noticed that Jared is another example of the rampant polygamy that's going on there. You don't have 30 sons from one wife. So showing that is the thing, people, men of power are having more than one wife. This is not pleasing to God. But yeah, that's what's going on. Okay, any questions? Right. I mean, this is one of those things where can't you imagine that somebody's like, I really hope I get in the Bible. And you're Tola, and you're like, well, I got in there. We get to heaven, we meet Tola. He's actually a really cool guy. We're like, just did his job. No complaints. Man. Let's go ahead and read. Verses 6 through, it's a long section we're going to read, 6 through 18. And we'll have one person read it, but if you are exhausted partway through, just simply pass the microphone to an unsuspecting neighbor and let them continue for you. If you have a volunteer to read, or someone who doesn't like their neighbor at their table. I keep it exciting somehow. Thank you, Sue. I appreciate this.
The people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth, the gods of Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Amorites, and the gods of the Philistines. And they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the land of the Philistines, and into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the Amorites. And they crushed and oppressed the people of Israel that year. For 18 years they oppressed all the people of Israel who were beyond the Jordan in the land of the Amorites, which is in Gilead. And the Ammonites crossed the Jordan to fight also against Judah and against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was severely distressed. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, We have sinned against you because we have forsaken our God and have served the Baals. And the Lord said to the people of Israel, Did I not save you from the Egyptians and from the Amorites and from the Ammonites and from the Philistines? The Sidonians also and the Amalekites and the Moabites oppressed you, and you cried out to me, and I saved you out of their hand. Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore I will save you no more. Go and cry out to the gods whom you have chosen. Let them save you in the time of your distress. And the people of Israel said to the Lord, We have sinned. Do to us whatever seems good to you. Only please deliver us this day. So they put away the foreign gods from among them and served the Lord. And he became impatient over the misery of Israel. Then the Ammonites were called to arms, and they encamped in Gilead. And the people of Israel came together, and they encamped in Mizpah. And the people, the leaders of Gilead, said to one another, Who is the man who will begin to fight against the Ammonites? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead.
Okay. So a longer section there. This isn't just Israel's sin and they were invaded. It goes into a lengthy description here of how things seem to be getting worse. If you remember back to the start of Judges, which seems a very long time ago, you have that where they were just falling to all these different idols. Here we have even more idols listed. It's kind of growing. It's also some different groups are coming up as sort of the powerhouses that they're dealing with. But this is also a couple hundred years later. So there's a long period of time between these events here. So it's not uncommon that they're saying the threats change and grow as time passes here. We're about 200 years from Joshua at this point. So it's getting along in time. So yeah, could you imagine that? That's the thing I think. So like, how long has our country been around? 250 years, more or less since the Declaration of Independence, if you want. And if you do that, imagine if like we spent 200 years not really as a unified country. Like it was just states kind of each doing their own thing for 200 years. Man, that'd be something. It'd be kind of fun. What if we were the Wild West for 200 years and not like 20 years? I mean, that would be the Book of Judges. So it's this long period of lawlessness, decentralization. Things are just going nuts the whole time. Very exciting. So going back to the start there, it mentions that it's worshiping the Baals and the Ashtoreth poles. This is worth going over again because we often throw the term Baal around there, but we don't talk about it much. One of the problems with talking about Baal is there were lots of different Baals. So Baal was sort of a generic term for a male god. Sometimes he was the god of rain and storms and thunder, but it was not always consistent across the board. Each sort of city would have its own way of worshiping Baal and following Baal. And Baal had this nasty habit of just sort of blending in with whatever other god you had. So let's say you went to a fishing village and your chief god was a fishing god. Well, Baal worship comes in and you just sort of blend the fishing god with the Baal god, and Baal becomes both the god of like the storms and the fishing. This will eventually happen to the people of Israel as well during the time of Ezekiel. But that's way outside the scope of the book of Judges right now. So this is what it has. He's often depicted as riding a chariot and throwing thunderbolts. This is when we get to the prophet of Elijah. He says, call on Baal to send fire from heaven. That's lightning. And so that's what he is known for. How does one worship Baal? Any guesses? Sacrifices. And that's the sort of thing. With Baal, you would also have human sacrifice as well. This isn't just sort of like, oh, they all gather together and pray. It would be sacrifices, it would be drunkenness, it would be sex with prostitutes. That's how you're worshiping Baal. Yes. Yeah, and I know, you're like, how do they think that it's like, so you understand that when the Israelites are worshiping God, they look nothing like these people. It's not a drunken feast, it's not debauchery, it is just simply we come in and, it's very different entirely. The Asherah poles, these would be a grove of trees or a single tree that would be done this way. Asherah was worshipped as a goddess of fertility, so oftentimes it would be women who would focus on Asherah worship because she was the goddess of fertility, and so she would be someone that women would go to when they want to have children. And again, she was worshipped in a variety of ways in a variety of time periods here. There wasn't like a hymnal that these pagan worshipers were following. It was just customs and traditions during the time period. But it would generally be a grove of trees where you'd have an Asherah worship. You go out in nature, you'd be among the trees, and say, trees, give me babies. And it would again be an unpleasant event.
Is that the name of the god or the name of the pole?
So, both.
Okay.
And she actually goes by Asherah, Ashtoreth, Asherim, Ashtaroth, and Asheroth.
Okay.
Because again, this is a very decentralized view of paganism, so her name changes depending on what community and region she's being in. So yeah, it is confusing because they're talking about an Asherah pole, but the idol is the god. Because that's the thing with idolatry, the idol is the god too, which is,
Okay.
it's not a symbol of the god, it is the god.
I think it was the various names that was confusing.
Yeah, because, it'd be nice if the Old Testament was consistent with calling things the same thing throughout. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if our Bible translators just called it Asherah every time and just, well, even though the Hebrews are reflecting the regional spelling, maybe that, yes, I agree. That would save people a lot of headaches. But I didn't translate the Old Testament yet. Anyway, I'm not going to. Anyway. So those two get mentioned out there. The other one that gets mentioned here is, I do want to bring up here, is a god by the name of Moloch, or is also known as Shemesh. Moloch or Shemesh is a Phoenician god. Now the Phoenicians are sea peoples. So what you have here is you have the Mediterranean Sea, and along here you have all these sort of ports. What the Phoenician people did is they were traders and travelers, and they traveled the Mediterranean and built trade networks. So the Philistines, which are down here, they would have been of Phoenician descent, as would the Carthaginians, who would have been in North Africa. And the Phoenician influence was massive. They are the ones who really get the alphabet going in the region because theirs have an alphabet, and they're using an alphabet in their trade. They're very important to the development of the region. And one of the things is because they have trade networks, they get their cultural ideas out there. One of them is the worship of a god by the name of Moloch. Moloch is the god that is often remembered for child sacrifice, because that was kind of the primary way that you do it. You would take your firstborn son, or maybe even more of your sons if you were in a big problem, and you would give them to Moloch. Generally, he's depicted as a giant bull god with outstretched arms, and he'd be a furnace, and you quite literally put a child on it and just burn him up that way. And that's how you worship Moloch. Yeah. That's the thing. Whenever you see Moloch, especially in Kings, it's, yeah, think of the worst of the worst. It's child sacrifice. That's what it is. There's a reason God says you can't have these people in your land. It absolutely makes sense. This isn't just like, oh, it's, the Buddhist monks are being nice and keeping to themselves. No, these are people who are saying we're going to go burn our children alive. And you should come join us. The last one I do want to bring up here is Dagon, who is another Philistine god who would be in this region during this time. So the Philistines, I said, are actually sea peoples originally, so they kind of have a sea god motif. I was going to show this. Oh, yeah. So I'm actually going north here. I am bringing this up. Tyre and Sidon get brought into this chapter. Sidon is just north. Tyre and Sidon are up here. Those are both Phoenician things. And now if we go down here on the map, you get the land of the Philistines down here, which overlaps with the tribes of Dan and Judah, so they're going to be fighting them. Dagon is a fish god, and we can see his temples throughout this region here. And so Dagon would have like the bottom half of a fish and the top half of a human. Think mermaid. Mermaid's the way to think of him, but probably a really manly looking mermaid, because the Philistines were a warlike people. So there you go. So those are kind of the gods that we're dealing with here when they're talking about they're abandoning the worship of the true God to all these other things. Now when they say they're doing that, that means they probably have those idols in their own houses, and they construct those places of worship themselves. It also means they are likely worshiping the same way as the other people do. So this would mean that they're also engaging in the debauchery and the child sacrifices. That's what it means. So when God is upset with them, it's understandable that he's upset with them. They have forsaken him and are worshiping the thing. This also may mean that at times they are also worshiping both at the same time. We will see this parallel worship here where they say, oh, we want to worship the true God, but, every so often we need help having a baby, so let's keep that Asherah pole just in case we need help that way. As if God can't do the one thing. So, yeah, they're dealing with polytheists, and they're taking on many of their tendencies as they are there. So God gives them over. Israel strays from the Lord. The nation obeys. This time we have the Ammonites coming in. And let's pull up the map for that. So we're in this region, again, of Gilead. This is a Gilead-focused chapter here. So Gilead is what I said was Gad. And you see it has Ammon right here. And so what they are doing is they're coming and invading this way. This is the primary invader here. It says they're getting into the region of Gilead, but then they're attacking Ephraim, Benjamin, and Judah, which is just south of Benjamin on my map. Ephraim is also sometimes a stand-in for every tribe north of Ephraim because it's the leading tribe of the northern tribes. And so it means everyone's getting invaded, but they started in Gilead and they're pushing out across the Jordan, so everyone is oppressed by these invaders here. It's not just a regional one, everyone is facing this. And this is likely why we have a longer section here, because some of these times it seems that the invaders are affecting a certain region. Like, for example, when we talked about Deborah, Judah's not mentioned at all because they probably weren't in trouble. This is everyone's in trouble. So the people cry out to the Lord, and they say, we have sinned against you because we have forsaken God and served the Baals. And it mentions the many tribes that they are serving during this time. And what happens is God responds to them. It doesn't say how God responds, but likely a prophet who's unnamed during this time period. And God has, it's like, yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore I will save you no more. Go and cry out to the gods whom you have chosen. Let them save you in your time of distress. Whoa. Yeah, let them do it. Yeah. And obviously what happens when you pray to these idols? Nothing. So God is teaching them there. It's like, you put your trust in them, how about we see what they do for you? Oh, nothing. Okay. And so the people do put them away, and it says, I love verse 16. So they put away the foreign gods from among it and served the Lord, and he became impatient over the misery of Israel. Who's the he there? Who became impatient over the misery of Israel? God did. Isn't that interesting? You know, God says they need to suffer to learn their lesson, yet God becomes impatient with their misery. In other words, I can't let them continue to suffer, because despite the fact they are wayward and foolish people, God cannot stand to have them suffer. So God's like, okay, I need to do something here. So God will send somebody to save them. The Ammonites are camped in Gilead, and so the people of Gilead said, we need to find a strong man to defend us, and whoever does it will be in charge of the whole region. So that's the plan. We're going to get someone who's strong enough to fight, and we'll make him in charge of this region. Sounds like a good job. Who will be up for it? Okay, I'm seeing hands up. I talked for a long time there. Go ahead, Justin.
When God said that about could he have been testing the people when they initially called on him for prayer, and he said, turn to the idol gods? Is he testing him to see if they're really going, at this time, if they're really going to come back to him and stick with him?
I think that's a large part of it too, How sincere are they? And as we can see, they have a good short-term memory, not a very good long-term memory. But yeah, so they do put it away. They are repenting at this point. They are putting away the idols they've acquired for themselves. So good. And when it says put away, that doesn't mean they just put them in storage. That means they're getting rid of them, Though I have to wonder, they keep bringing out the idols. It does make me wonder if they have storage. No, they don't. That is not what it means. Yeah. Bruce, you had your hand up.
Listening to these yahoos and their abominable practices and attitudes makes my after communion prayer of thankfulness so much more precious.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? I know this is kind of it's a nuts and bolts section that sets it up. I see Amy has her hand all the way up here. I should stall and say something insightful while we wait for the microphone to travel, but I'm out of insightful thoughts for the moment.
I hope it's worth it.
I really do. We're building it up.
Well, it emphasizes to me how the refrain that God gave the people, the hero Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, because all around them were multiple gods. And I remember reading, a theologian had a theory that in the Old Testament, the Trinity wasn't emphasized so much because it might be confusing to the people. I don't know.
That's brilliant. I really like that idea. No, I really like that. Huh. Do you know which theologian that was?
No, I can't remember.
I never did either, so it's like but no, I think that's a very interesting insight. Anyway. One thing I did want to bring up was today's psalm we read was Psalm 138. Psalm 138 is a psalm of David, and the first verse really caught me in church today. I give you thanks, O Lord, with my whole heart. Before the gods, plural, I sing your praise. And some people have said, oh, this was referring to the angelic host, but I think this is referring to the idols. Because David spent his time away from the land of Israel, in the land of the Philistines, where he was fleeing from King Saul, and so in the midst of all these false gods, I will sing your praise. I was like, man, that's just like us today. We are surrounded by false gods in our culture, and we sing with our whole hearts thanks to God, even in the midst of the idolatry around us. So anyway, it just made me think of the Japheth here, and what we're going to talk about. Sir, in the back.
So this may be completely unrelated.
It probably is, but so is my last comment.
So God's telling the people that that he would no longer, that he would not help them. Is there any relation to excommunication in the church with this, or are they completely separate?
I like the idea there, because it's like the point of excommunication is to bring the person to repentance. Because you brought their sin to them, you brought a second person to bring their sin to them, you brought the congregation to bring their sin, and finally you remove them from the congregation, that hopefully they finally get the point that yes, they're sinning and need to repent. So God here is saying, I'm not going to protect you in order that you finally repent. Because I've warned you, I've told you, I've taught you, I've been gentle with you, now I'm going to be rough with you, and hopefully you finally get the lesson. Yes, I think there's a good connection there. Okay, let's learn about Jephthah, who I don't like saying his name because it just does not roll off the tongue. If you mispronounce his name or say it slightly different pronunciation, I don't fault you. He's hard to pronounce. That "th" and "th" sound together is terrible. Anyway, good luck. So you guys are going to be reading, one lucky volunteer, will be reading verses 1 through 3, and then hold on to the microphone because I'll have you read a little bit more. And go ahead and listen to this section here, and hear what a promising young man this sounds like. And he might not even be that young by the time they're calling on him. So let's hear about him.
Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior. His father was Gilead. His mother was a prostitute. Gilead's wife also bore him sons. And when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. You are not going to get any inheritance in our family, they said, because you are the son of another woman. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the land of Tob, where a group of adventurers gathered around him and followed him. Sometime later...
Okay, nope, we're going to stop there for now, because we got our introduction to him. Okay, so what we have here is, we have his introduction that he is a mighty warrior. That's probably denoting his physical stature, or maybe the fact he's just really good in a fight. Uncertain what it is there. But it says that he was the son of a prostitute, which also is, again, an indication of how things are going in the land of Israel right now. So what happens is, he also has a wife who bore him sons, dad dies, and so now there's the family conflict. Because you get that, when dad's around, he says, you are all my sons and I love you all, even you, even though you're from the son of a prostitute, I still claim you. But once dad's gone, the other brother's like, no, get out of here. We don't have any part with you. This also reminds us the issues with polygamy. This is also probably a reflection also in our society, where we have a lot of people who don't have traditional families. They have step families, and they have those difficulties and conflicts there, saying, what is our relationships with one another? Because, you know, how do I treat an adopted brother or a step brother, or, you know, a half brother? How do I deal with these sort of things? These are messy things to deal with. Don't do what they did. Don't just drive them out and say you don't belong to the family anymore. But rather, we need to continue to reach out in love and acceptance and patience. But yeah, it's a difficult scenario. These people are a lot like us. So they drive them out, and your translation, Ron, had adventurers. A better translation, I think, is worthless people. He is getting a bunch of outcasts much like himself, because he is kicked out, driven out from his things, and he has to go to Tob. Tob would have been north of Gilead. So we're getting up here in this region that we have Bashan. So he kind of has to leave his homeland. He's driven out to the north, and he gets some worthless fellows or adventurers along with him. And this is something where he's probably proving himself as a mighty warrior, because most likely he's probably a bandit at this point. So he's somebody who might be running like a mob, or he's running like a bandit group here, and they've set up their own little contingent of strongmen for themselves, and they've taken over maybe a region or a town like that. Maybe they run a protection racket, something like that. So this is kind of the scenario that he's in. Maybe he's a mercenary. They hire him out for, jobs, saying like, hey, we got a problem with this people, can you go deal with them? It's like, well, you got to pay us, great, we'll go deal with them for you. This is the kind of person that he is. What an introduction to this guy. But if you're in trouble and you're being invaded, you need somebody who knows how to fight. This guy knows how to fight. There is a great moment in history that involves Andrew Jackson during the War of 1812. We're at the end of the War of 1812, and we're coming up to what is one of the most important battles is the Battle of New Orleans. The British hold New Orleans, and the Americans want to take it, so General Andrew Jackson goes down to fight. And on his way, he is contacted by a pirate of the Caribbean known as Lafitte. And what happens is the pirate says, you need cannons? I got cannons. And Andrew Jackson starts negotiating with them, and Lafitte's like, I never attack American boats. Pirates honor, And so he actually uses pirates in the Battle of New Orleans in his victory. And he beats the British. What's also exciting about the Battle of New Orleans is the British signed a peace treaty with the Americans several days before the Battle of New Orleans, but news hadn't reached them yet. Well, actually it is good for America because if Jackson did take New Orleans, the British probably weren't going to leave it. But anyway, that's history for you. And Andrew Jackson again conquers something that, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, so think of Andrew Jackson, think of pirates. Anyway, that's the kind of guy that he is. So maybe we have a character for us. I thought also maybe a thought to him would be like a gangster. Think like an Al Capone kind of thing. If America got invaded when Al Capone was running his stuff, wouldn't we want to sign a deal with him? Hey, we'll make you governor of Illinois if you could just get rid of the invading Canadians in Illinois. Could you see a deal like that being struck? I could, anyway.
At various times, both Lucky Luciano during World War II and Sonny Barger of the Hells Angels offered their services to the government.
Okay, so the Hells Angels, and who was the other group?
Lucky Luciano, a mobster.
So the mobs and the Hells Angels offered their services to the government during World War I. To do what? I really want to know this now.
I don't remember at the moment.
Were they going to be in the police? I mean, or were they going to go fight? I'm curious what was going to happen. Why didn't we take them up on the offer?
Both of them offered overseas action.
That's incredible. I mean, that sounds like it's probably a bad idea, but for me, who's has sort of a comic book view of history, it's like, that sounds awesome. A bunch of Hells Angels riding their motorcycles. That sounds really cool. I'm sure that's not how it would work. Anyway. Wow, we're learning a lot of history today. Let's keep going. So let's read verses 4 through 11. And I think Ron still has the microphone, so keep reading.
Sometime later, when the Ammonites made war in Israel, the elders of the Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. Come, they said, be our commander so we can fight the Ammonites. Jephthah said to them, didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you are in trouble? The elders of Gilead said to him, nevertheless, we are turning to you now. Come with us to fight the Ammonites, and you will be our head over all who live in Gilead. Jephthah answered, suppose you take me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me. Will I really be your head? When the elders of Gilead replied, then the elders of Gilead replied, the Lord is our witness. We will certainly do as you say. So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and commander over them. And he repeated all his words before the Lord in Mizpah.
Thank you. So here we have the negotiation between these two. They say, hey, come down, we need you to lead our men. It makes sense. He's the strongest guy in the region. He has guys who train in fighting. Come on down. And he says, nah, you drove me out. You cast me out. You hate me. And they ask, no, well, we want you back. When he says, you hated me, it may be that some of the elders are his relatives. It may be the very half-brothers who drove him out. It may be cousins or uncles of them who drove him out. So he is getting so he's saying, no, now we want you back because we realize we need you. He says, are you really going to make me head of you? Because that's my condition. And they say, yes, they are. I like what he answers here. If you bring me home to fight against the Ammonites, notice he calls it home. I love that. It still is home. The Lord gives me over to them. So he gives credit to the Lord already before he even fights a single battle. A man of faith. Belongs in Hebrews chapter 11. At least for now he does. Anyway, and so they make that deal. They repeat the words before the people at Mizpah, and now it's set. He's going to lead them. And so what we have here is what you were hoping we would get here. Is the next section is a history lesson. I was hoping that, and a territorial dispute. Because he does something that no other judge in the book of Judges thinks to do. He tries diplomacy. Can you do that? Yes, you can. So what he does is he tries diplomacy. And this section here is fascinating for me for that, because no one else tries to do this. So he uses diplomacy to avoid the conflict here. It's a longer section here. I'll go ahead and read that, and then we'll talk about it. I'm going to read 12 to 28. Then Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said, why do you have against me that you come to fight against my land? And notice he's assuming the headship. He calls it my land. The king of the Ammonites answered the messengers of Jephthah, because Israel, on coming up from Egypt, took away my land, from the Arnon to the Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now therefore restore it peaceably. So saying, why are you fighting me? I'm just trying to get back the land you guys stole when you came up out of Egypt. And let's see, so there's the Jabbok, Arnon, let's find it here on the map quick. There's the Arnon here, so the Jabbok to the Arnon to the Jordan. So he's saying this region here, so the southern half of Gad, all of Reuben, he's saying, that's my land, you stole it from me when you came up out of Egypt. That's why I'm doing that. Jephthah is now going to use history to refute his argument. So do your best to follow along, and then we'll explain it. Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites and said to him, thus said Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. But when they came up from Egypt, Israel went through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom. So let's get Edom on the map here. So it's in smaller print, but right at the bottom half you have Edom. So they're coming up this way, they come up to the region of Edom. The Edomites are the descendants of who again for the Old Testament? Esau, thank you. Remember Jacob and Esau, Jacob becomes Israel, Esau also goes by Edom, which is easier to remember because they both start with E's. Okay, where were we? I'm reading this because I'm going to keep interrupting myself instead of interrupting one of you. It's much less rude when I interrupt myself. Yes. 17, thank you. Israel then sent messengers to the king of Edom saying, please let us pass through your land. But the king of Edom would not listen. They sent also to the king of Moab, but he would not consent, so Israel remained at Kadesh. So they talked to these two kingdoms saying, let us pass through your land, and you can read about it in the book of Numbers, and they both say no. And Israel even says, we're going to stay on the road, we'll pay you back for any animals we eat, any water we drink, just let us pass through your land, it's on our way to where we're going, and they both say no, because they're terrified of this group. They're a large number. This is when they go around, they have the poisonous snakes, they grumble about manna and quail, there's water from the stone, and the Moabite king sends out the prophet, what's his name again, to curse them. Balak, the guy with the donkey, yeah. So that all happens during this time.
Where's Kadesh or Kadesh or whatever?
Kadesh, it's south.
Okay.
It's like, it's right here-ish
Okay.
on the map.
Okay.
My map doesn't go down that far. Then they journeyed through the wilderness, went around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and arrived at the east side of the land of Moab, and encamped on the other side of the Arnon. So they're on the east side of Moab. Israel then sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon, and Israel said, "Please let us pass through your land to our country." So now they're dealing with another king who is an Amorite king. And right now they're dealing with Ammonites, which is hard to know what's the difference between, but it's an N and an R. So I know they sound very much alike, but this is a different group. So now we're dealing with Sihon and the Amorite land. And this would be what we're looking at here. We're looking at sort of this region where we have Gilead. But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory, so Sihon gathered all his people together and encamped at Jahaz and fought with Israel. And the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hand of Israel, and they defeated them. So who was the aggressor in this conflict? Sihon was. So it was the Amorite Sihon who starts the conflict. So Japheth's saying, we were attacked first, we just attacked back. That's the point of this comment here. So Israel took possession of all the land of the Amorites who inhabited that country. Notice he is saying, this was Amorite land we took, we didn't take any Ammonite territory. That's the point of this. And they took possession of all the territory of the Amorites from the Arnon to the Jabbok to the wilderness of the Jordan. So then the Lord, the God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites from before his people of Israel. And are you to take possession of them? Will you not possess what Shamash, the God, gives you to possess? And Shamash is another name for Moloch, the god of child sacrifice. In other words, we were given this land by our God. Why don't you keep the lands given to you by your God? That's his comment there. And all that the Lord our God has dispossessed before us, we will possess. Now are you any better than Balak, the son of Zephor, king of Moab? He's the one who sent to have them cursed. Did he ever contend against Israel, or did he ever go to war with them? Well, Israel lived in Heshbon and its villages, and Aor and its villages, and all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, 300 years. Why did you not deliver them within that time? In other words, we've been here for 300 years now, and now you're saying that we took this land rightfully? Where were you all this time? So he's saying, you don't have a claim, we've been here for 300 years, and we didn't even take your land. We took someone else's land, so you don't have any claim. So diplomacy here.
It's really interesting that a man like this knows this really old history this intimately.
Yeah. Let's get back to the comment. I'm going to finish the verses, and then let's get to that comment, because that's a brilliant comment. I therefore have not sinned against you, and you do me wrong by waking war on me. The Lord, the judge, decide this day between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon. But the king of the Ammonites did not listen to the words of Jephthah that he sent to him. And you made the comment, how does this guy know all this? Well, he apparently has studied the books of Numbers and Deuteronomy. That would have covered this history very well. This is also very important to this region here, because Numbers and Deuteronomy give the reason why this region in particular is Israelite territory. Because the land promised to the people of Israel is on the other side of the Jordan. And reading Numbers and Deuteronomy, you hear about the conquest of this region, and also the tribes asking to settle in this region and not take land on the other side, and the arguments they have with Moses and what God decides to do about this. So this is important regional history for one thing. And it's also, yeah, I have to admit, I'm impressed by this guy's knowledge, because he's the bastard son of an important person. He's just from running a bandit thing, but yet he is apparently eloquent and well-educated. Maybe he's Robin Hood. Maybe that's what we've been doing. He's sort of that dispossessed noble, son of an important guy, but dispossessed with his merry men in the woods, beating up people for their money, you know. That's what it's like. Yeah, but yeah, it gives a thing. And this speech here is beautiful. This is why he belongs in Hebrews chapter 11, because if you can talk like this, you belong in that Hall of Fame of Faith. That is a great letter. I'm sorry, I'm very impressed by it. Not many people do this in the Bible.
If only he had not made this tragic vow.
Oh, wait, are you reading ahead? A tragic vow? Don't spoil it for everyone, but that's what he's known for. What he does here that's good is very easily eclipsed by his sin. I saw a hand up.
This could be why he was considered a mighty warrior. Even as people in Israel today recounting history of Palestinian lands and such were given to them by God. Our mighty warriors.
Yeah, any other questions on this section? I know I tried to explain it as I went along, tried to let you follow along on the map, and it's kind of a complicated history here. Okay, let's move on. I don't know if we'll get a full discussion in based on the time, but we're going to do our best to get through the tragedy of Jephthah now. And we probably won't get through all of it. So let's read all the way to 33, and things are going to go well until verse 33. So let's have some happy thoughts, and then we'll go to the unhappy part. And it just kind of crashes. And this seems to be the traits of judges. They do really well, and then they crash. Gideon did that. We're going to see Jephthah do that. We're going to see Samson do that, and then have a little spike up at the end. And we're kind of done with judges after that point, and then we get the nasty epilogue that we get in this whole book. Let's hear verses 29 through 33. Volunteer to read. Somebody who likes to give us our last bit of hope before it's dashed. I think you guys don't raise your hand right away just to hear me say these little pithy comments. I'm not sure. Maybe I should stop saying them.
Then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Jephthah, and he passed through Gilead and Manasseh and passed on to Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead he passed on to the Ammonites. And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. So Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord gave them into his hand. And he struck them from Aror to the neighborhood of Minnith, 20 cities, and as far as Abel Keramim with a great blow. So the Ammonites were subdued before the people of Israel.
Okay, we don't have a lot of details on this battle other than he was successful in driving them out, and there was multiple battles that took place in this whole region of Gilead, and they were successful. He makes this vow to the Lord. This is a promise that he's making. Whatever first comes out of my house, I will offer as a burnt offering. What is a burnt offering? It's a sacrifice, which means that you're going to take, let's say it's a goat. You take the goat, you kill the goat, and then you butcher it a little bit, and then you burn it before the Lord. That is a burnt offering. I do want to clarify that because it helps make the next section make sense. Is this a smart thing or a dumb thing to do? It's a dumb thing to do. I'm just going to answer that question. This is a very dumb thing to do because he's assuming the first thing to come out of his house is going to be a goat or a cow or something like that. Yeah, out of the door of his house. That's what it says. Out of the door of my house. And this would probably be something where we're seeing like a pagan influence there, because this would be the kind of vow that a pagan would make. And we can actually see, if you read Greek mythology, there's a Greek character on his way back from the Trojan War. He makes a similar vow. So you do see this in this time period where you have the sort of the pagans who will do this. They'll say, if you do this for me, O gods, I will then give you this. That kind of conditional vow. Yeah, I know, everyone's like, this is terrible. Yeah, it's terrible for a lot of reasons. And it's as if God was not going to be with him anyway. So, you know. So let's read the next section here. Go ahead, Mark.
Why would he think that a cow or a goat would come out to greet him? That's what I don't understand. If he's saying that the first thing that comes out of my house to greet me, I mean, I could see possibly a dog, because dogs are very, dogs do that.
Yeah.
But a goat or a cow, they would seem to be rather indifferent to me.
I'm not saying this guy made a good choice here. Yeah, like and this is something where, you know, one of the phrases was studying history, sometimes is the past is a different country. You look at something like this, and I often try to be like, oh, you know, he's like Robin Hood, or he's like Al Capone, trying to relate like what kind of character he is. But when I get to a moment like this, I am at a loss for words for comparison. Like, what is this like in the modern world? It's like, I have no clue. I have no clue what this is like. Anyway, let's read the next section here. It's to the end of the chapter, verse 34 and following. No one wants to read this section. I don't like it. Then Jephthah came to the home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with tambourines and with dances. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter. And as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, for you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow. And she said to him, My father, you have opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites. So she said to her father, Let this thing be done for me. Leave me alone 2 months, that I may go up and down on the mountains and weep for my virginity, I and my companions. So he said, Go. Then he sent her away for 2 months, and she departed, she and her companions, and wept for her virginity on the mountains. At the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had made. She had never known a man, and it became the custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went year by year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. Yikes. Yeah, that's... Ugh. And this does reflect how bad things are in the book of Judges. This is not pleasing to God in any way whatsoever.
Couldn't he have asked God to release him from his vow?
Okay, so what you're thinking here is you're thinking, couldn't he say, God, release me from the vow? You know, again, that would take someone who I think is not Jephthah to do this. And I think that's one where it's saying, this is displeasing to God and I should not do it. This is abominable to God, because God abhors human sacrifice. And you could even think of Abraham and Isaac, where it's saying, he could, if he knows the history of Israel, why did he say, in the same way that Abraham was redeemed for a ram, I should redeem my daughter in some other way. And we're actually going to talk about something in a second here that, I'm going to open a door here, but I'm going to say I don't know.
Is this perhaps any type of warning for us to try to negotiate with God? If you do this, I'll do that?
I would say absolutely. I think that is a wonderful application for this. How would we just take God's blessings as they come and not try to force his hand? I agree with that. We don't control him.
Luther would have become a lawyer and would not have reformed the Catholic Church.
You know, as much as I love Luther, Reformation was coming with or without Luther. And there were other people who were reforming the church even among them. Even like some guys who gave half efforts like Erasmus, who was making headway at that time period. And I think some version of the Council of Trent happens with or without Luther, but Luther basically, I mean, if it wasn't Luther, it was going to be someone. So yeah, I know we like to say Luther did all this. He did. He deserves a lot of credit, but you know, it's kind of like if we didn't have George Washington, could we have still won? I think so. I think there were other generals at the time who were of the same caliber as Washington, but you know, he did it.
They were fighting on the other side, but they were...
Well, you got like, I would say that at the same time you have like Anthony Wayne is a good general. I would say you have Benedict Arnold's a good general if he stays loyal. What?
Up to a point he was.
Yeah, well, yeah, he was still a good general, it's just, anyway, but yeah. Okay, the reason, something I do want to talk about this section here is there are some people who have actually posed the theory that Jephthah did not kill his daughter here. And the reason they say is they say that human sacrifice is abominable to God, and that what it would have been service to the tabernacle that she was given. And they would use the passage from 1 Samuel, where Samuel is offered up to the Lord in service to the tabernacle. They would also look at, for example, like Anna, who is also lives as a widow all her days in the temple. That's from Luke chapter 1 or 2, one of those two chapters. Luke 2, I think. And the reason for this is also the strange language here. Because what happens when it says, I'm going to offer you up, what does she wail for? Her virginity. The fact that she won't be married and she won't have children. So some people have said that this is an indication that this is instead she's given up to service, where she won't take a husband, will instead live as a virgin and serve God in the tabernacle. And so then he doesn't kill her. And that's a theory that's out there. I'll just let you know that. The issue with that is Jephthah in his vow said it's a burnt offering that he's going to do. Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, that seems to be reading a lot into the text that isn't there. There's also the strange comment that, you know, it says that this is commemorated by the women going into the hills for 4 days. If she gave her life as a life of service to the Lord, would they do 4 days for that? If she's killed, would they do it? Seems a really weird celebration too. Both of them seem really weird to do this sort of thing. So, I'm going to read someone smarter than me and give you their thoughts on the topic. And you may not like it because they may not like how it comes out here. This is from a book called Prepare the Way of the Lord. It's written by two excellent authors, R. Reed Lessing and Andrew E. Steinman. One's a professor at Concordia, Chicago. The other one's a professor at Concordia, St. Paul currently. This is, if I taught high school or college Old Testament, this is the textbook I'd have people use. This is a delightful one. And if you would like a sort of textbooky thing, this is made for people who don't read Hebrew, but it's still like a good textbook to look at. I really like this book. Okay, I'm going to read his comment, the comments of, I don't know which author wrote this, so one of them wrote this, maybe both of them did. Jephthah's success, though, is tarnished by the one story for which he has become famous. One day before he left for battle, he said to Yahweh, "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house will meet me when I return in triumph, will be Yahweh's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." Victorious he returned, the first thing to come running to meet him was his daughter, his only child. That word is, it then says that word is also used of Isaac. These connections invite a comparison between children's fathers, Abraham and Jephthah. Abraham is commanded by Yahweh to offer up Isaac. Jephthah takes matters into his own hands. Yahweh delivers Isaac and commends Abraham for his faith. Though the text in Judges is ambiguous regarding the faith of Jephthah's daughter, the flippant father is subtly condemned for his rash vow. Jephthah is certainly no Abraham. Though he lamented over having made such a vow, he told his daughter, who is never named, that he must keep it. And after spending 2 months in the hills weeping with her friends, she returned and her father did to her as he vowed. Did he sacrifice her or didn't he? Most commentaries say he did. Others note, and this is a good point, that his daughter did not bewail her impending death, but her unending virginity. Give me 2 months to roam the hills and weep with my friends, because I will never marry, verse 37. This seems to be a curious comment, if shortly thereafter she was put to death. But if the remark was meant to indicate that she remained a virgin all her life after her father fulfilled his vow, it seems to make more sense. Either way, though, she would die childless. The story ends by reporting that it came to be a custom in Israel, the young women would go for 4 days each year to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. If Jephthah did sacrifice his daughter, would we expect women to mark the anniversary of such a wretched event? However, if he devoted to her a lifetime of service at the sanctuary, which was not entirely unusual, mentions Hannah and Samuel, would such a commemoration have arisen at all? This account must be included in the story of Jephthah regarding this question. Did he or didn't he sacrifice his daughter? And then, point of criticism to this book, that's how it ends the section with that question mark. And I'm going, you didn't answer my question. Okay, so I'll admit, I've wrestled with this one, getting ready for this Bible class. Did he or did he not kill his daughter? I'd say the most plain reading is that he did kill her. And this is not meant to be any sort of thing that he's a good person for this, or that God wanted the child sacrifice. I do understand the argument saying that he did not sacrifice her, and there is appeal to it. So I'm not going to say I know for certain on this one. I think there's a good argument made very both ways. If you look at Jewish commentaries and historians, they say he killed her. So I'll just put that out there too. Dorcas.
This Bible translation is the New English Bible, and it says, I will offer that as a whole offering. He doesn't say burnt offering. This translation says whole offering, W-H-O-L-E.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be a distinction there between that, because a whole offering and a bird offering would be the same thing. You're offering the whole animal.
Well, whole is all herself.
Okay, I understand
I
that.
see what you mean.
It's the thing, it's like, if you're offering, yeah, well, I'm not gonna get this. I am a minute over time, I cannot do the sacrificial system in 30 seconds. Diane, yes.
I love historical movies, and there's a movie with Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner about that Battle of New Orleans. I don't remember the name of the movie, but
Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner, Battle of New Orleans. Is there pirates in it?
yes.
I recommend it already. Anyway, that's all you need to know. Carla, I think you have the last
I just
comment.
had a quick question. If she, in fact, was not sacrificed but was destined to lead a life of service, would she have been one of the women to go to mourn for the 4 days? I mean, would she have been included in that group to go signify that time?
I think she would be. That's interesting. So maybe she led it too. Anyway, so what did we learn today? Don't make rash vows to the God. Don't try to do what the other idols do. If it's part of another religion, ignore it. Get rid of it. Get it out of your life. Serve God as He has told us to serve Him. All right, let's pray. Dear Lord God, may we indeed be true to You and careful in what we say before You. May we seek Your mercy and Your love and Your forgiveness. Amen.